short rows in stockinette stitch. German short row are probably one of the most straightforward methods of working short rows that you have. The only thing you have to be careful of with them though is don't use them in cases where you've got a loose gauge, because they're not going to hide things as well. So when you work a German short row, you're going to work to the point where you want to turn your work. And I'm just going to go a little bit further down so I have room to do short rows on each end. And then you just stop, turn your work, make sure your yarn is in front of your work, and slip this stitch purlwise from your left needle to your right. Now what you're going to do is take the working yarn and give it a pull and lift that, see that stitch from underneath there, you're going to lift it up and over to create this double stitch. Now we need to bring the yarn back in this side to purl the next stitch, so bring it between the needles, holding that double stitch in place, and just begin purling in the other direction. When you encounter it, when you come back, you're just going to treat it as a single stitch. So on this side, when you want to turn your work, you stop, you turn around. This time you can see your yarn's at the back because you had just done a purl row. But with German short rows, you always bring that yarn towards you before you slip the stitch, then slip the stitch. So then the yarn's on this side, so you can again pull that stitch from the row below up and over. And so what you're trying to do is where that has stopped, normally when you're doing a short row and you do a wrap or something like that, you're using the wrap to close the gap. This time what we're doing is when we turn, we're effectively pulling the stitch from the row below to minimize any hole from one row to the row where we turn. So you hold that in place to keep that up nice and tight, and you work all the way across here. I'm going to just stop here because you can see this is that funny old double stitch that we created. So when I'm referring to a double stitch in my work, that's what I'm talking about. And we're just going to go in right in here as though it was one stitch and knit it and keep on working. And once I get to the end here, you can take a look at what it looks like. It gives a very tidy finish. And one of the nicest things about the German short row is it's the same on both sides. So if you've got a tight gauge in your work, I think it is probably one of the most effective short row methods. But a loose gauge, you can't get that pull up of the stitch from the row below, so it doesn't effectively close the gap for a loose gauge. So I'm just going to purl my way back on this side till I get to that what I'll call double stitch or funny looking stitch. On this side it looks a little different because it was pulled from the other side, but again you'll treat it the same way and put your needle into that double stitch as though it was one stitch because you don't want to create an extra stitch, and continue to purl my way back down here. When that's done, let's take a look to see what it looks like here and on the other side. And you will probably agree that that is one of the tidiest methods of working short rows out there.